Om Sri Narayana Paramaguruve Namaha. Today is a very special day, a very auspicious day, I should say, aus- an important conclusion to a very significant week. Early in the week, we saw reports of Sri Narayana Open University in Trivandrum being commissioned, the MOU being signed. Uh, 2 days ago, we saw SNG's request to have a separate uh, uh, department for Sri Narayana Guru's studies, which required a deposit of 1 crore of rupees uh, to Mumbai University. That was fulfilled. Yesterday, Vice President of India um, released um, 2 books of Professor Shashidharan, not many, but one. The Vice President uh, spoke about Sri Narayana Guru from his heart, and such in-depth analysis of the relevance of Sri Narayana Guru today. In fact, one wondered um, how he has such in-depth knowledge. He is indeed a follower of Sri Narayana Guru. So today, Professor Siby, another significant person who has supported, who was instrumental in initiating and um, putting for giving clearances about the Department of Philosophy on Sri Narayana Guru in Mumbai, is with us to share his thoughts about the Advaita philosophy as put forward by Sri Narayana Guru. It is really, really wonderful. We are really fortunate to have this talk today. I would like to welcome all of you, and over to Yumna Hari Singh to propose the formal welcome and to introduce our speaker today. Yumna?
Thank you very much. I would like to take this opportunity to welcome you all. May I now request everybody to put their devices on silent. And we all have had an opportunity to hear from Professor Siby George earlier. We're thrilled that he's come back for this lecture series, season 2, with us. Professor Siby George is a professor of philosophy at the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences at the Indian Institute of Technology in Bombay. He has studied Sri Narayana Guru from the point of view of phenomenology, which is his area of special interest. His area of interest is also social philosophy. He is the author of Heidegger and Development in the Global South. A book by Springer came out in 2015. Martin Heidegger, as most of the scholars here would know, was a German philosopher who is widely regarded as one of the most important philosophers of the 20th century, best known for contributions to phenomenology, hermeneutics, and existentialism. Professor Siby is also currently editor of Teaching in Unequal Societies, a book that came out by Bloomsbury in 2020. Welcome, Professor Siby George. I welcome you to present to us now. Over to you.
So, thank you, Jija ma'am. Thank you, Yumna, for that wonderful introduction. Thank you, Jija ma'am, for inviting me to speak in the Guru Anugraham lecture series for a second time. Today, I am doubly happy, as all of you also are, because Mumbai University is starting its academic program on Narayana Guru studies. I had also pitched in my bit in preparing the syllabus and reviewing the initial proposal of this program. Last time I spoke to you about Guru's understanding of the self in two senses of self-othering and its ethical significance. Today, let me recall what I said in the last lecture. So the first was a philosophical idea of self-othering. That means the not to or Advaita self is not the same as the self-centered individual self. Rather, it's a self other than any other, is what I said. Other than the individual self, definitely. The trace of the self-othered self pervades and interconnects all reality. And because of this, we must act for the good of all. So that's the first philosophical sense of self-othering. The second is a practical sense of self-othering. It means that we can notice in the writings and life of Sri Narayana Guru that in the interest of the not to self or Advaita self, Guru practiced gestures of self-othering by understating one's own self and acting in favor of others. So his many gestures of selflessness I narrated to you, actually. Today, I want to speak about an idea of Advaita oneness, which does not disrespect or play down the reality of difference in human affairs. So I titled my talk as Oneness, Difference, and Guru's Advaita of the Other. In this talk, I will refer more to the interpretation of Narayana Guru by Nataraja Guru. Because he has, for example, written this book, which you all know, called Experiencing One World. Yeah. Okay. I begin with a caution that Nataraja Guru begins with in the integrated science of the Absolute. Here he notices that in modern philosophy, there is a fear of absolutism. So he writes that the notion of the absolute has gone out of favor in the modern world, in modern thought. This notion often leaves a bitter taste behind it when mentioned in the various contexts of modern life, he writes. The very notion of the absolute has begun to be explicitly discredited, he says. Modern philosophy is sometimes characterized as being non-absolutist and analytical. He gives two reasons for this fear, this horror of absolutism in modern thought. One is political totalitarianism and fascism. You know, totalitarian philosophies of the nation state consider the nation as an absolute and the citizen as somebody who worships or pays obeisance to the nation. Whereas in the liberal philosophy of the nation is supposed to be a servant of the individual and his or her well-being. So that's the first reason for the fear of absolutism. The second reason for the fear of absolutism is religious dogmatism of the church. We know the background of that. You know, in the medieval times, there were inquisitions and things of that sort, and many scientists, great scientists like Galileo and all, suffered under that kind of dogmatism. The great philosopher Immanuel Kant, he has written a small essay called What is Enlightenment in 1784. Here, he begins the essay with what he calls as the principle of modernity. the slogan of modernity. And the slogan is dare to know, or in Latin, sapere aude. That is, know in independence from authority and in freedom. The modern individual is supposed to know things or understand things without reliance on authority. Absolutism, however, relies on the authority of accepted principles of perfection like God, idea, substance, monad, and things of that sort. Therefore, absolutism leads to intolerance. Pluralism became the popular philosophy in modern thought. I spoke about this in the last lecture as well. Therefore, the basic idea of modern philosophy is that there is no single principle on which all can agree. But Nataraja Guru also says there is a notion of the absolute, of absolutism, a kind of absolutism in all philosophies, whether directly or indirectly, whether explicitly or implicitly. It is the assumed ground of all kinds of philosophizing. One example. If you think that you are a skeptic is one who doubts everything. That kind of philosophy is called skepticism. So, the absolutism of skepticism is this, that nothing is absolute. That is the absolute principle of skepticism. So Nataraj Guru interprets Narayana Guru's philosophy in terms of a form of absolutism. But what kind of absolutism? That's the question. I will narrate to you an anecdote which is recounted in Professor Bhaskaran's Sri Narayana Guru Vaikhari. This is recounted actually by Kuttipura Krishna Pilla. So the incident goes like this. Once, a Christian missionary, his wife and children, came to pay a visit to Narayana Guru. You might know this incident. But their intention was really to preach the greatness of Christianity. They also presented him copies of the Bible. So when they went away, Kuttipura and other disciples, curious disciples, they wanted to know Narayana Guru's opinion on what transpired just before, just a few minutes before. He only said one word, Pavangal, which means poor things. Why did he say so? He was feeling pity for them for their tunnel vision, for their narrow-mindedness. That is a kind of irrational dogmatism which these evangelizers carried with them. Not that Narayana Guru was averse to conversion. Because, for example, he told Sahodaran Ayyappan, the rationalist, in 1923, that matam in Sanskrit means opinion, and people should have the freedom to change their matam, their opinion, their religion. So, Narayana Guru's absolutism, or the absolutism that Nataraja Guru attributes to Narayana Guru, is a very different kind of absolutism. It is not dogmatism. It is not irrational dogmatism. It is not orthodoxy, irrational orthodoxy. So let us find out what the one or the absolute of Narayana Guru is according to Nataraja Guru's interpretation. To cut the long story short and not to leave anything for surprise, I will already tell you that what I'm going to argue is that the one or absolute that we find in Narayana Guru's writings and life and Nataraja Guru's interpretation is an absolutism that does not dismiss difference as illusory, delusionary, deceptional, or anything of that sort. Okay. Now let me go into Nataraja Guru's interpretation. So Nataraja Guru gives Narayana Guru's term Brahman a twist. He interprets the term Brahman from a thoroughly Western philosophical point of view. And for that, he is using the term absolute, which is well known in Western philosophy. This term is introduced in Western philosophy by two great German philosophers of the 19th century called Schelling and Hegel. This term resonates also in the writings of 17th century German philosophers like Spinoza, Spinoza's term substance, and the well-known philosopher and mathematician called Leibniz, whose term monad. You all know that Nataraja Guru's doctoral supervisor was a very famous French philosopher called Henri Bergson. Henri Bergson has a term called intuition. And somewhere, Nataraja Guru cites, Bergson mentions that intuition attains the absolute. And therefore, Bergson's term intuition also resonates with the idea of the absolute for Nataraja Guru. So, Nataraja Guru equates Brahma Vidya, as he says in Experiencing One World. He equates Brahma Vidya with the term the science of the absolute. Now, what is the absolute or Brahman in this philosophical sense in Western philosophy? It is this. It means that which, not something, that which means the only thing. The only thing that has an unconditioned existence. The only thing that is not conditioned by anything else. The only thing that is not relative to anything. The only thing that is not dependent on anything else. That is the absolute. This is usually taken to be the whole of things taken together. The unitary spiritual meaning of the whole of everything, both material things and spiritual aspects of them. This is often thought in Western philosophy as something self-knowing. And this self-knowing is expressed at least in part by the human mind, through the human mind. Therefore, it is rationally intelligible. Whereas finite things are not fully rationally intelligible because their cause is outside them. They cannot explain their own existence fully. When, for example, we ask what is the meaning or what is the meaning of our origin, we have to at least point out our parents. They are the ones who gave birth to us. But when we speak about the absolute, its cause and effect and everything is in itself, not outside it. That's the absolute. This is why Nataraja Guru keeps referring to unity or integrated absolutism. He really wants a unitary perspective that integrates modern science, physics, and modern philosophy, metaphysics. You might know this author called Deborah Buchanan. She is also, I think, a devotee of Sri Narayana Guru. She has written an introduction, a small introduction to Nataraja Guru's The Search for a Norm in Western Thought. It is included in this book called Unity of Philosophy. You might know, you might have seen this book by Nataraja Guru. So here, Buchanan writes that the absolute of Nataraja Guru is a ground where particular perspectives and polarities interrelate and complement each other. Therefore, let me cite Nataraja Guru's definition of the absolute in the Integrated Science of the Absolute, Volume 1. It goes like this. In the beginning pages, you'll find this. The absolute is not a thing, nor is it a mere idea. When the philosopher has correctly located the paradox lurking behind appearance and reality, the paradox itself tends to be abolished into the absolute. That is, Natarajaguru is saying that the usually considered paradox of appearance and reality will have to be resolved, and then only the absolute can be seen or understood. He continues, the absolute is a neutral notion in which all real things and all possible ideas about them can be comprised without contradiction or conflict. The next line is important. Thus, it is both a thing and an idea at once. Both a thing and an idea at once. Truth, reality, fact, existence refer to aspects of this central neutral notion named for convenience the absolute, unquote. That's what Nataraja Guru defines the absolute as. Now, the absolute is the simultaneous and unitive embrace of two aspects of reality in the widest sense. Philosophy is interested in the widest of things only, the most general. So, in the most general sense, in the essential meaning of things, reality has two essential aspects. This is also called the dual process of reality by Nataraja Guru, or truth. These are merged without contradiction in the absolute. He uses several terms to explain this idea of dual processes. The thing and idea, that's what we saw previously. Physical and metaphysical, they merge in the absolute. Axiomatic and experimental. Axiomatic is value based, axiom is value. Experimental is factual. Being and becoming, immanent, that which is here and now, and transcendent, that which is beyond. Relative and absolute, subjective and objective. Vertical, spiritual, consciousness, the self, and the horizontal, the non-self. Concrete and abstract, intuitive dynamism of Bergson, and static conceptualism of Immanuel Kant, Western philosophers. All these are brought together in what he calls integrated unity of the absolute. He also uses biological metaphors to explain this. For example, he uses the term endosmosis to say endosmosis and exosmosis. So endosmosis in this sense means the unconscious assimilation of understanding from the world. So when we are children, we assimilate the world in a passive sense. We don't know the meaning. What others tell, oh, this is a book, this is black and this is white. We accept these and we form meaning, and sedimentation process is going on in this at this stage. Exosmosis is the conscious understanding expressed towards the world, to others in the world, on the basis of this sedimented meaning that is there behind our consciousness. Now, with regard to Nataraja Guru's term absolute, in relation to Narayana Guru's philosophy, what is to be kept in mind is the wide range of the term, the vast range of the term. For example, Nataraja Guru emphasizes that mysticism and common sense will have to go together. Usually we consider them as absolutely opposite. Religion and science will have to go together. Usually we consider them as irreconcilable. Then only, he says, we get a fully normalized notion of the absolute. So he wants a normalized notion of the absolute, not in the traditional Advaita sense of a high, unreachable absolute. He wants a normalized notion of the absolute. So, non-duality means, Advaita means, no two-ness means, multiplicities are not two in essence. Differences don't disappear or contradict each other, but they are integrally one in the absolute. To experience the absolute, therefore, the faintest thought of duality must go. We must consider them as integrally united. What is the method to know the absolute? Now, Rajaguru says the method to know the absolute is the dialectical method. Now, the dialectical method is attributed to Hegel in modern philosophy. The dialectical method means the contradictory aspects, the thesis and the antithesis, the positive and the negative, merge together, come together and merge themselves and form a synthesis. So, Nataraja Guru is taking this idea, which is used by his doctoral guide, Henry Bergson, as well. He uses this idea and says both these aspects, the dual processes will have to be given equal primacy in the notion of the absolute in Narayana Guru. Both these aspects, the ideal and the material, subjective and objective, all these will have to merge. So he writes in Unity Philosophy, the book called Unity Philosophy. We have to imagine that the relative, which depends on its own absolute counterpart, and the absolute, which depends on its own counterpart, the relative, cancel each other out into the neutrality of a central absolute that knows no second. Differences are real, they are valid. They are invalid and unreal only when they are considered separately from their ground in Brahman, in the absolute. So again, he writes in this book, all things are real in themselves, but they cancel out themselves when examined as consisting of exclusive classes. So Maya means the error of such consideration of exclusion from Brahman, from the absolute. What is the meaning of liberation or moksha then? He writes, liberation or salvation and heaven mean only the same high value of wisdom represented by the science of all sciences, the science of the absolute. This means knowledge of the absolute, knowledge of Brahman. So, from so far what I said, the absolute is not a thing, not merely an idea, but a conscious standpoint, a point of view on reality, a perspective on reality, a conscious standpoint of viewing reality in a perspective of the interconnectedness of all things, all beings, without contradiction and conflict. That is the absolute. So he writes, Narayana Guru's major contribution to Vedanta may be said to consist of this analysis of the content of the universe of contemplative and absolutist discourse, which gives equal place to the pure and the practical. Equal place to the pure and the practical, the phenomenal and the nominal, and a due place to the relative and the absolute in a globally unitive and neutrally conceived normative notion of the absolute. So, Narayana Guru's philosophy is a philosophy of pluralism as well. So, Nataraja Guru writes, transcending such an either or neither nor situation in favor of both at once is the task that Guru philosophy boldly sets before itself. What is the meaning of normalization? I said I'll explain it when I spoke about it first. Normalization means this: not letting either of the axes dominate thinking. The two axes are the vertical and the horizontal. Vertical is the spiritual and the horizontal is the material and concrete and practical. So we should not allow any of these axes to dominate our thinking. In religion, the vertical dominates. In psychology and the natural sciences and human sciences and social sciences and usual philosophy and so on, the horizontal dominates. Whereas in the unitive science of the absolute, they are normalized and balanced. That is the credit Nataraja Guru gives to Narayana Guru's insight, his special Advaita. Seeing every piece of knowledge or claim in the vertical horizontal axis of the graph of the Absolute is very important for Nataraja Guru. Recognizing and rejecting the non-integrative aspects is another important part of his integrated science of the Absolute. What are some of these non-integrating aspects? For example, caste. I'll come to that later. So Nataraja Guru cites in unity philosophy the following verse 73 from Atmopadesha Shatakam. I'll recite. ഒരു പൊരുളിങ്കൽ അനേകമുണ്ട് അനേകം പൊരുളിൽ ഒരർത്ഥവുമുണ്ടെന്ന ബുദ്ധിയാലെ അറിവിലടങ്ങും അഭേദമായതെല്ലാവരും അറിവിൽ അധികോപനീയമാകും. That means, in one object, പൊരുൾ, subsists many aspects, anekam. Just as many objects have one meaning, artham. But most people do not have the secret, gopaniyam, understanding, buddhi, that in consciousness, arivu, all that is united without difference. All this is united without difference, bhedam. In this sense, certain contemporary interpretations of Hegel's absolutism, absolute concept of the absolute, are also similar. The perspective of absolute knowing in Hegel's famous book, The Phenomenology of Spirit, is, according to a new interpretation, it means this: the acceptance that we are always one-sided appropriations of an infinity that exceeds us and claims us. Infinity is the absolute. We all know the story of 10 blind men and the elephant. 10 blind men of Hindustan and the elephant. Each one says elephant is this, elephant is like a winnowing fan looking at the ear, touching the ear, and elephant is like a broom touching the tail, and it's like a pillar touching the foot. But elephant is not any of this. Elephant is all put together, the integration. This is what, this realization is what people are, this interpreter is attributing to the philosophy of Hegel. That's what Nataraja Guru is also attributing to the philosophy of Narayana Guru. So when, in every time we are busy with our concrete life, our practical life, sometimes at least in meditative moments, maybe in prayerful moments, maybe in ponderous, serious moments, we can take a step back and have a perspective on what is happening with our life, with our world, and see things without contradiction, and how different perspectives make sense when we look at them together. This is very important if you want to be a thinking person, if you want to be a follower of Narayana Guru. Now, so this infinity or absolute simply means that there is a whole or totality which is infinitely other than what is given to us as finite beings. As finite beings, we cannot have a vision of the whole. We are limited. So realizing that we cannot have the limited vision of the whole is itself because of the absolute. Is itself, that itself is the knowledge of the absolute, at least a limited knowledge of the absolute. So from this point of view, there is no more necessity of calling this perspective as materialistic or spiritualistic, especially because modern science is increasingly narrowing down the difference between the material and the immaterial. I suppose this is what Dr. Shashidharan's book is arguing. There's a socialist feminist philosopher called Donna Haraway. She is a philosopher of technology, modern technology. She says modern science has broken down 3 boundaries. One is the boundary between the human and the animal. We're increasingly realizing that we are a part of the animal family. The animals have many things, even consciousness, even awareness that we have, but maybe in a different form. The next boundary that is broken by modern science is the animal machine boundary. We are realizing that machines can be intelligent, a different variety of intelligence, but they can have a degree of or a type of intelligence. The third boundary that modern science is breaking is the boundary between physical and the non-physical, material and the immaterial. She says, our best machines are all light and clean because they are nothing but signals, electromagnetic waves. For example, we today carry pagers in our heart. And there are human life is improving because machines can be integrated into body and the body can function as though is function organically without the machine. So our surety that the nature of the absolute is immaterial consciousness alone need not be there. It could go, it should go. There's no need of materialism as well. That is another kind of irrational or dogmatic absolutism, not the type of absolutism that Narayana Guru wants. What we require is the perspective of the absolute in this sense that Nataraja Guru speaks about. From this perspective, what is the meaning of Maya? That is the most controversial aspect of Advaita Vedanta. Nataraja Guru says that Narayana Guru agrees with the critics of Maya. And he says, Nataraja Guru's words, he gives to error an absolutist status, almost equal to the positive absolute. Maya is the negative absolute, according to Nataraja Guru. Nataraja Guru says, moves away from the Advaita tradition of seeing Maya as totally unreal, which Nataraja Guru says is a confusing approach. For Narayana Guru, Maya is, in the words of Nataraja Guru, the vertical negative aspect. The negative Brahman, that's a beautiful phrase, the negative Brahman, who gives rise to all horizontal aspects of matter and all aspects of the world. He writes in Integrated Science of the Absolute, towards the end of the first book, first volume, Maya refers simply to the negative vertical parameter, which means normalization with reference to its own positive counterpart. Both positive and negative are then to be cancelled out in favor of a fully neutral and normal absolute. He quotes from Darshanamala 4.7. Chapter 4 is actually Maya Darshanam. So the verse goes like this. Indriyanam hi vishayaha prapanchoyam visarjyate, which means this world emanates, comes out as the object of the senses. Yaya saiva paradhyatma sthula sankalpa namayi is the verse, which means Maya, Yaya, is the gross presentiment, sedimentation of the will in comparison to the self. Okay, so I have explained the absolute, the interpretation of the absolute, the one in Nataraja Guru's writings. How do we now understand oneness and difference? With that, I end. How do we interpret oneness and difference? Differences are never denied by Narayana Guru, except when they are explicitly harmful, just like caste. Professor Uday Kumar of JNU speaks about, in relation to Narayana Guru, the degree zero of difference. This I spoke to you about in the last lecture. So in Guru, there is a difference that is harmful, which is denied. That must be overcome. That is the degree zero beyond which you should not go. He did not consider any religion as the most superior, not even Advaita. Advaita is not a religion. It is a perspective, a spiritual perspective on reality. In Experiencing One World, this book, Nataraja Guru discusses one world government, economics, education, science, religion, ethics, and several other things. What does he mean by this? Oneness, in this sense, according to Nataraja Guru, is not difference blind, is not difference denying. Oneness is our ability to see difference from the point of view of the absolute. For example, one world government is for the happiness and goodness of all. It is induced by the knowledge of the absolute, achievable for all without distinction of race, religion, rationality, sex, or even station in life. He is writing in Experiencing One World. One world economics is similarly based on the goodwill of all, goodwill for all. When he writes, when all are happy, the individual is happy. And when individual happiness is not guaranteed, the collective program of happiness or welfare defeat their own purposes. Unquote. Similarly, what is one world education? He emphasizes that in one world education, the unity value that resolves all contradictions is the perspective of the absolute. So there are certain values which are essential, whatever be our differences are. That is a signal towards the absolute. What is absolute? What is one world religion? In religion, the shining of the absolute happens in the absolute value of happiness which is there in all religions. That is the uniting factor of all religions. This can be achieved through an absolutist way of life, according to Nataraja Guru. In ethics, it means the recognizing conflicting interest of self and other, and to treat the others as treat self and other as interacting unitively without horizontal interests, creating conflicts in the way of correct ethics. What is one world, oneness and absolute, and the absolute with respect to the modern science? The sciences can be unified through normalization of approaches on the basis of the central normative value of the absolute. So in this way, he proceeds explaining everything in all different aspects of our knowledge, our world, in relation to the essential aspect of the absolute that is penetrating these aspects. In conclusion, I want to end with this question. Is there any hierarchization or considering any element? We spoke about the horizontal and the vertical aspect. Any of these aspects, any of these two axes, is there any way of considering one as superior to the other in Nataraja Guru's writings? So I was reading it very carefully. And I found that sometimes he considers, towards the end of the second volume of Integrated Science of the Absolute, he considers the Jnana Nirvana or the higher Nirvana beyond good and evil and action. It is pure awareness alone. And he sometimes calls it the superior Nirvana. But he also writes that the normalized Nirvana, his own words, I'll quote, the normalized Nirvana represents the central or neutral attitude proper to the representative absolute, absolutist. That is, an absolutist who is in both these spheres, who may set the standard. He is a standard, she is a standard, while all others are only eccentric or abnormal variations, however valuable in themselves. What does he mean by that? At least I interpret him to say this. The absolutist who is the standard must be the one who accepts the horizontal and the vertical aspects in equal importance, in balance, without giving any hierarchy to either. without considering one as superior to the other. Even what Natarajaguru calls the superior nirvana, even that will be abnormal or eccentric from this standard point of view. So the absolutist, the one who lives this way of life, is involved in both action and contemplation, prayer and activity. In the visible, he accepts the visible and the intelligible. He or she accepts the visible and the intelligible in equal priority. There is nothing superior. The intelligible or the spiritual is not superior to the practical. I think that this is the way, this is what we should take. This is the innovation as in a philosophical sense. I think it is also in a spiritual sense, but especially in a philosophical sense, this is the innovation that Narayana Guru's Advaita introduces into the philosophy of the absolute, philosophy of Advaita. We don't need to, there is no dualism of the spiritual and the material, no dualism of the concrete and the ideal. This kind of way of life fully accepts both these aspects. The nirvana of action and contemplation is a neutral and normal position, that the standard position of the absolutist. This is the interpretation of Narayana Guru, at least personally, that I like and I would appreciate. It sounds extremely modern and contemporary from any point of view of the social sciences or even science, according to Professor Shashidharan and others. If we don't take this view, how do we understand Narayana Guru's invitation of even atheists and non-Hindus to be part of his ashram? How do we understand Narayana Guru's encouragement of the rationalist Sahodaran Ayappan? How do we understand Narayana Guru's advice to people from the margins to learn English? People from the margins means the exploited people, the lesser people, especially at that time, to learn English, to earn money, to be educated, to seek social advancement, to overcome inequalities and caste barriers. He was not a traditional Advaitin. Professor Pradeep, my colleague from IIT, he had invited me to a talk given by Sunil Ilaidam on Narayana Guru in Malayalam, in another group. So there, he was emphasizing that Narayana Guru's speciality is this. His contribution to Kerala Navodhanam and the whole Renaissance in India was this, a spiritual axis and a very practical axis. So he was not a traditional Advaitin. He was not like Ramana Maharshi, his contemporary. He was an Advaitin of this world, very much involved in this world and its problems. He was thoroughly incarnated, embedded in the socio-cultural milieu situation of his times. One more incident and I stop. See, in 1925, anecdote. In 1925, we all know that Gandhi came to Vaikam. I'm actually from Vaikam town. So Gandhi came to Vaikam and then he went to Shivagiri and met Narayana Guru. And after Gandhi left, this is in the collected works of Mahatma Gandhi, volume 30. Here he writes later in a newspaper column. These are his words. I feel that so long as the human race continues, differences of creeds and religions will indeed exist, since there are many minds and not one. Many minds and not one. Gandhi is certainly referring to Narayana Guru's famous statement, Oru Jati, Oru Madam, Oru Devam. Now, the question is whether Gandhi is wanting caste difference to continue in some way. It might appear from his later activities and later pronouncements, it might appear, political activities, it might appear that he wanted caste system to continue in some way. But what we know is Guru was not convinced at all about Gandhi's method of nonviolence that pandered to the interests and sensibilities of the privileged castes. This is recorded in Mahatma Gandhi, collected works of Mahatma Gandhi, volume 28, and Gandhi writes against Narayana Guru's perspective. This is also recorded in another book. Again, Professor Pradeep gave me this book. It is called Gandhian Nonviolent Struggle and Untouchability in South India, the 1924 to 25 Vaikam Satyagraha and the Mechanisms of Change. Is by a British scholar called Mary Elizabeth King. Very well researched book. I have not seen any book of this sort on the Vaikam Satyagraha. So, Srinarayana Guru neither took caste as a difference that must continue undisturbed, nor accept the difference of caste as an illusory creation of Maya, a social illusion or deception that can be overcome only by liberation at death. He carefully worked in a non-confrontational way to overcome caste. Not like Gandhi, who thought that the goodwill of the privileged castes will change the caste system. That is the main thesis of this book. Mary King's books. Mary King's book argues that Gandhi's optimism about converting the privileged castes and getting concessions on caste from them, from their largesse, was a wrong, misplaced, and dysfunctional approach. Guru's approach was not this. He was a tremendous organizer of people, though not in a confrontational way. He believed in emancipation, liberation here and now, liberation today, not tomorrow. So we once again conclude that Narayana Guru's Advaita, an Advaita that takes care of the horizontal and the vertical axis, as Nataraja Guru interprets him, is an Advaita of the other. There is no blind denial of difference in Narayana Guru's Advaita. No consideration of the world as a deception, illusion. The world is the site where we work towards our liberation, emancipation, both material and spiritual. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I was so involved in taking notes that I am surprised that you have now said thank you and concluded, despite your letting us know that it was coming. The conclusion was coming. I was very, very entangled in the thoughts that you are putting forward, the incidents that you were narrating. I would like to request people to ask any questions that they may have at this point. You should be able to unmute yourself, request that you unmute, ask your question. If possible, please keep your video on while you ask your question, and then mute yourself again. Thank you so much. Any questions right now?
It's not a question, but sir, your lecture has been wonderful. I'm listening for the first time. And 1 hour, I don't know how it has gone. I was so keen because I am more interested in the core philosophy of Narayana Guru, which from the books I'm unable to digest. You said it in a very, very, very technical and understanding way. It has really attracted my attention. And one more incident I just wanted to tell you. It is not only on Sahodar Nayappan did Guru say about religion. He told to Mahatma Gandhi itself. Mahatma Gandhi during the meeting asked Guru, this conversion is happening in Kerala. What is your opinion about that? Narayana Guru, what is replied was that if the converted people are becoming happy, what is wrong in that? That is what, actually he wanted to get a statement from Guru, a public statement. For that only he took up this discussion with him. So he has cancelled Gandhiji there itself on that point also. Just I wanted to tell you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mohan. Anybody else with any comments? Or Siby sir, if you want to respond.
No, thank you, Mr. Mohan. Yes, yeah. Actually, in the last lecture, I had narrated all the Gandhi Guru meeting quite in detail. So that's something very fascinating, because after that meeting, in fact, in his silence and in his few words, he demolished the whole philosophy of Mahatma Gandhi, actually. Because especially in his early years, 1925 is still early years for Mahatma Gandhi after coming to India from South Africa. So he was trying to figure out how to get everyone into the freedom struggle. So one problem was caste, and he wanted to unite the Hindus who were separated by caste communities. And he was maybe personally against caste system. I don't think Gandhi practiced caste in his family or in his house or in his personal activities or personal interaction with people. But he was very hesitant to politically disturb the upper castes. So that is the context in which he is wanting to get a statement from Narayana Guru in favor of his ideas. But Guru was not willing to give it. So that's why one problem is that many of our historians in India, they're not realizing this. It was a great meeting, but this is not given much attention in India's historical narratives. So yes, yeah, that's what I wanted to add. Thank you, Mr. Mohan, so much.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
I can say something.
Yeah.
Because probably, the priorities set by Narayana Guru and Gandhiji were little bit different, because Gandhiji wanted India to be politically free. And for that, as you have already mentioned very rightly, he wanted to have some kind of an integration or a mutual trust be developed from the otherwise divided Hindu society as well as the other religious societies. And we know that there were so many small countries and their so-called kings who all had their personal uh, uh, intentions. So Gandhiji probably wanted to have a united approach by all Indians in wherever it is possible. And another thing, what I remember is that, sir, I do not know very well, but I have heard is that when Gandhiji established his ashram in Sabarmati, I think he had kept a Harijan family with him in the same house. So as you also rightly said, personally, I do not think that he had practiced any caste system, but because the priorities were a little bit different, and as you mentioned, Ramana Maharshi also, there is one incident that Mahatma Ji visited Ramana Maharshi asking his spiritual support for his freedom struggle. And the reply given by Ramana Maharshi was that I am already free and I do not find the reason for a freedom struggle. I just thought of bringing this to. Thank you
Right.
very much.
Yes, oh, that's a very interesting incident. Ramana Maharshi incident, I didn't know. Though I have read Ramana Maharshi's books and incidents surrounding Ramana Maharshi. Yes. So, yeah. So, there is a scholar in Center for Development Studies, I think, in Delhi, who gave a talk in Professor Pradeep knows, he gave a talk in IIT, who sees who sees Gandhi's caste-related views and activities purely from the point of view of his life, of the biographical details of his life. So from that point of view, according to that scholar, Gandhi was not believing in caste system. But as you say, he was strategically moving. He was, whether that is right or not, I don't know. I don't want to judge. But he was strategically pandering to different blocks of population, to the Brahmins and um, to the Dalits and others. So he had a big fight with Dr. Ambedkar, and he today when scholars look back at the Pune Pact and his confrontation with Dr. Ambedkar, many people lash out at Gandhi's approach. But I think at that time, at that historical moment, he was at least confused with regard to what approach to take to bring everyone together. And towards 1947, if I'm not mistaken, he has given a statement when somebody wanted to trick Gandhi. In public, they asked him about his views on Gandhi. So he said that, I don't think their caste system in any way should be there. So at least one statement we can see in Gandhi where he speaks against caste system completely. Otherwise, the early statements are all when he meets Narayana Guru and in the 1920s and 30s. His view in public is very clear that caste system in some form is an integral part of Hinduism and Indian society. We all know that in India, it's not only the Hindus who practice caste system. We, most of us are Malayalis, we know that Christian community, for example, is yesterday I was watching a YouTube video of a Dalit Christian narrating his experiences. So these are there. So every community it's not only in India, it's a South Asian phenomenon. Pakistan, there is caste. So Ambedkar had to write after independence to send the Dalits back to India because they were exploited, and Pakistan was unwilling to send them back, whereas they were willing to send every other Hindu back. Because otherwise, who will clean the streets of Lahore and all those Karachi and other big cities? So these are there. So but the thing is that we had to have historically figures like Narayana Guru, Ambedkar, and several others. Narayana Guru is so relevant, especially today with the political establishment has changed, and there is a lot of the new kind of discourse is emerging in society. So there is this is the right time to look back at the spiritual figure who thought of liberation in a social and spiritual sense. This is the time in 2014 onwards I began to read Narayana Guru. Before that, I was not reading actually Narayana Guru. So it is a time when politicians use all kinds of discourses in order to gather votes. That's I don't know. We call them but this kind of discourse entering in society at a big level into education, into the children's minds, and hatred of communities. So that I view it with great trepidation. So from this point of view, when we look at Narayana Guru, his teachings and his life and his whole message is absolutely fantastic. This is the time for Narayana Guru, according to me.
Namaskaram, Professor Siby George. I am Dilip here from Kochi. I'm second time I'm listening to you. So wonderful. I think this is very apt that you came for the second time, because the first lecture I was little bit skeptical on your interpretations of the otherness of Narayana Guru. But with this lecture, especially going through the path and the methodology of Nataraja Guru, especially the unity philosophy path, you have wonderfully explained the concept so brilliantly, and otherwise following Nataraja Guru's books are bit difficult for the common people. You being a philosopher, you will be able to follow it maybe in much better way. But for people like us, doesn't have a philosophy background, it's very difficult to follow. But today's lecture, you have made it so simple, and I'm so happy that you came for the second time and cleared most of these things and established more clarity on the Advaita philosophy of Narayana Guru. And finally, the superior complex, superior aspect you have explained. There I would like to quote in the Charama Sloka, the rationalist Sahodran Ayappan says, Shuddha Yasho Nirvanate Adanya Sadguru. A rationalist is saying about the Shuddha Nirvana. Many people may not be knowing in Nirvana also there are Shuddha, Ashuddha, normal and other things. But a rationalist like Sagodhan Ayappan is saying that Shuddha Yasho Nirvana Te Adanya Sadguru. So that is a kind of influence Narayana Guru made on everyone. Thank you so much, Professor, and really enjoyed your talk this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dilip Kumar.
Really wonderfully summed up, actually. I would like to only say, I really don't know whether I am having some transmission problems. I do not know whether I can be heard.
Yes, you can be heard.
Okay. So I would like to only, I mean, it was such a fantastic expose of the most difficult concept about the absolutists. But it was, you reconstructed in such a beautiful way with such clarity that all of us are very, very happy. One thing I liked was, I wouldn't be able to repeat quite a lot of things about but what I liked the best is you're saying that actually it is a conscious standpoint of viewing reality, and that equal importance is to be given to the vertical axis and the horizontal axis, and that no hierarchy is there in the concept of in the Advaita of Sri Narayana Guru as interpreted for us in the language that we understand by Nataraj Guru. The way you have put it, as Dilip has said or Mohan has said, that it's very difficult to read Nataraja Guru and understand, but with the foundation that you had laid for us about the distinctions between physics and metaphysics, the real and unreal, and many of these opposites, how you have presented, I'm sure we are now in a better position to understand the otherness of Sri Narayana Guru and how and to understand the paradox and to understand how everything is the real, unreal, whatever it is, all the paradoxes come together in the philosophy of Sri Narayana Guru. Really, really wonderful that you could come again and clarify a lot of our thoughts from your earlier speech and also from listening to many of the others. We have a presenter doing economics, and we have dwelt upon various aspects of this unitive theory, but the way you have explained everything is totally fantastic. Thank you very much for that. I think if no more questions are there, perhaps Yumna could conclude, or anybody else for any more questions. The distinction that you that came out in the question and answer session, the distinction of in the thinking process of Mahatma Gandhi, and how he focused on the higher castes, thinking that their largesse could bring up the dark underside, the heavy underbelly of India. And what you mentioned about Ambedkar, who thought that by giving reservations and by focusing upon them and upon the marginalized more, perhaps they can come up and a kind of equalization can happen. And how Sri Narayana Guru did not really agree with either of them. These were the stalwarts of that time who talked about caste and things like that. And how beautifully, as you said, in a very non-confrontational way, how he won over the the Gandhis and and all the other leaders, political leaders, and also the ruling class, everybody, all inclusive. He was a social reformer, he was a spiritual leader, and how he combined it so easily, so what do you say, so seamlessly, to use a modern word. How he had done it is a total marvel, really. And as you also, I would also like to underscore what you said, that it seems that a time has come. It seems that we have to start questioning the duality in everything. And of course, there will be a lot of opposition from fascist thinking, from the political leaders, political thinkers. But philosophically, actually, the time has come for Sri Narayana Guru's philosophy and the unity of theory and the theory about the self and the other, or self and everything else, all the paradoxes coming together. Thank you very much once again. Over to you, Mna.
No, there's a question addressed to me on the chat privately, actually.
Yeah.
Can you speak a bit on Guru's take on the state in the context of his statement, "It's the Britishers who gave me sannyas"? See, Narayana Guru, at one point, it seems somebody asked him his opinion on the British. So everybody at that point expected, because people are in the thrall of the freedom movement or just about starting. So people expected him to give a bashing to the British. But he said, no, it is the British who gave me sannyas. So no, but the questioner's point is perhaps I'm interpreting, perhaps is that Narayana Guru's understanding of the state of the nation is not parochial. So at one point I said that, people are afraid of absolutism because of the political totalitarianism. So Narayana Guru's absolutism is not political totalitarianism. He's not a worshipper of the state. That's why, as an Indian, he can say that it is the British who gave me sannyas. So he's thoroughly critical of this. In philosophy, we call internal criticism and external criticism. We criticize the Westerners for several things, exploitation. If we are not able to see what is going on within our society, what's going on with respect to the underprivileged in our country, then what's the use of, blaming everybody else? It is true that we need to do that, but we also should have an internal eye. So this is very evident in Narayana Guru's statement. So with respect to his approach to the state, one thing that I don't know, I have not looked at Narayana Guru's writings from that perspective, but one thing that is evident is that he was not a worshipper of the state. He was not a worshipper of the nation in an absolutist sense. His absolutism is a conscious, reflective moment that we take in our life in order to see things in perspective. And that perspective will include our practical difficulties, our differences in life and resolving them, as well as our spiritual struggles. So I think that's what I'll end with. I have another comment also, but that's just a comment. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you so much. I think I have been called upon to do the closing this evening. I just wanted to say you have had definitely, I think everybody is responding with very similar comments about how pertinent and timely this talk is and how grateful we are that you've come for a second time, because I think your first talk gave us some building blocks upon which we have now built when you have spoken to us again. Against a external environment where you have caste continues to be such a problem for India, where love jihad is on the political agenda. There are forced abortions, left, right, and center. The conflict around caste is at the center of so many issues that the country continues to face today. It also becomes pertinent on a global scale when you talk about the whole Black Lives Matter movement that swept across. Originating in America, and you would think that race would be the biggest issue there with their history of slavery, but the impact it made in other parts of the world also, we continue to talk about today. So it was fascinating for me how you made the links between the Western philosophers and Sri Narayana Guru, the way you explained the axes of spiritualism and materialism, the fact that in Jnana Nirvana, that it's all equal, that it exceeds this good and bad. So there were so many nuggets that I personally took out of it. Thank you very, very much for joining us. It has really been fantastic. I always feel like even though we're tired at the moment, we want a continuation at some point. And I don't know when that might come, but hope to have you back with us again at some point. I would also like to thank all who make it possible for us to put these fantastic talks together. Dr. Jija Madhavan Hari Singh, she's put together this fantastic group and this lecture series that deepen our understanding of Sri Narayan Guru's teachings, particularly special to me and to others because it's in English. I'd like to thank Shaj for putting together the poster. He wasn't able to join us today because he has a friend in surgery. Shaj, thank you so much as ever for being the steady backbone to the group. Thank you to all of you for taking the time out to spend it together as a community as we seek to deepen our collective understanding. And on that note, I would like to bring this evening's session to a close. Thank you all.
I would like to thank my IIT friends, Vishnu and his invitees, and all the other friends, Pradeep and Anish. And all. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Jida, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank
And
you.
thank you, Yumna.
Thank you, Yumna. Thank you, Vishnu. And thank you, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Raghunandan, Mohan Kumar, Soman. Thank you, everybody who have come here and added value to this discussion. Very, very pertinent, very, very erudite, but with a lot of clarity. Beautiful presentation and beautiful discussions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, we hope to see you back on this platform sooner than later.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Venu. Thank you, Mr. Dilip. Thank you, everybody who asked questions. Thank you to everybody who listened. Good night. Have a good Sunday, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you
Bye.
so much. Thank you.